Hello, this is Steve Brule with Studio Brule, and I've got my patriarchal hat, my obligatory emergency patriarchal cigar in case we're going to explode some feminist heads here, and of course my patriarchal scotch. And welcome to the live broadcast with Janice Fiamengo tonight. And hi, Janice.
Hey, hi, Steve. How are you doing?
How are you tonight?
I'm pretty good. I've got my patriarchal ginger ale.
Ah, yes, your Scotch Light.
Yeah. I have to keep my wits about me if I'm going to deal with you.
I've gotten rid of my wits many years ago. I don't know if it was an accident or if it was on purpose. But
Not so.
Yeah, so we're here tonight and we're going to talk about various comments and feedback from viewers on some of the recent videos. We've had quite a week this week. We have this is our fifth video this week. We've had a prepared broadcast Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week. Big week, huh?
Pretty good.
Yeah. So what's first on the agenda, do you think, Janice?
Yeah, so I thought we would talk about your video about the manipulated man, the first in your Red Pill series. And I like the idea of that series very much, and it seemed like quite a few viewers did too. So I thought we could dive into some of the more, questioning or skeptical or challenging comments and get your response to some of those. I just wanted to say that, one of the greatest privileges of having a public forum. I mean, it's a great privilege just to be able to have a public forum at all. But I really, more and more as I've done these videos, I'm really excited at the idea of having the space below the videos to engage in, civil debate.
You mean the comment section?
The comment section.
Right.
Yeah, the comment section. And, when I first started doing videos, I wasn't really sure how much I should respond to the comments or anything like that. But now I really look forward to hearing what people have to say. And so I want to encourage everybody to use that space for reasoned debate. And I am always happy to be nicely called out on errors of fact or misinterpretations. I mean, I think the challenge of doing this kind of work, if I can dignify it with that term, is that
it's work. It's hard work. I know for a fact that you work hard at this.
Yeah, I mean, one does the research in that, but and part of the challenge is actually to remember that there is an audience, a diverse audience. And I find sometimes I get carried away, sometimes I'm really angry when I'm making the video. And so to get the tone right is a challenge. You're always making decisions about what details to include, what details to leave out, what particular tack to take. And it's easy to get things wrong. And so it's crucial to be respectfully called out if one does get things wrong. And I want to, I want to be able to stay open to criticism. I mean, there's certain kinds of debates that aren't worth engaging in, and very few feminist ideologues ever come into our space. I guess they just don't. But and sometimes it's dispiriting if people are very dismissive. I find that if I'm watching somebody else's video and I disagree with some of the things they say, but I still find interesting maybe the main argument that they're making, or even if I'm only interested in one part of it, I would never dismiss the entire argument because I disagree with some details. So sometimes I find it a little dispiriting when people are very quick to say, I can't believe you mentioned so-and-so. And, as if that's the only thing that mattered in the entire 15-minute text that you put together. Anyway, but of course, everybody has the right to respond as they see fit, but I would really encourage people to engage in that kind of civil argument in the comment section. I really appreciate it.
Well, there was a good example of that in your firefighter one when one commentator, and I forget his name now, had mentioned that he'd sent a letter in to some public broadcasting radio station in Australia, complaining, or New Zealand, was it?
Yeah, I think so,
complaining about that very, very same topic, not exactly the same presentation as you had, but it was a good letter, and we pinned that to the top of the video at your request because it was such a good letter. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really excellent to see that somebody else had looked into the study and was taking that radio station to task in very similar terms to what I'd tried to do.
Very encouraging that other people are picking up on this. Not very many people. But there are people, and that's what you're alluding to in the comment section, that we hope to get more and more of that kind of feedback that we can highlight.
Yeah, and I want to be kept honest too. You know, I have no objection to having flaws in my argument pointed out, because it is easy to make mistakes in this kind of a forum. So,
yeah, of course. Yeah. No, and that makes another good point, that there is no human being on the planet Earth in all of history that gets everything right all the time. And that doesn't mean, I think we've talked about this on previous videos, that doesn't mean that we throw out an entire body of work because of some errors. You know, if we did that, we would not accept anybody's work for any topic.
Yeah, so that's true for sure.
But there is a tendency to do that today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, people are on the lookout for any flaw, you know, any momentary slip or, you know, any error, and then that's the end of you, supposedly. So, yeah, I'd like to have lots of argument, but in good faith.
Excellent.
So to come to that, which is not to say that, you know, our people who watch our videos and engage in the comments section don't do that, because in general, I would say most people are pretty good natured and pretty honest about how they engage. Your video, really enjoyed it, about mainly about Esther Vilar's book, The Manipulated Man, which was published in 1971. And, in which she put forward this totally counterintuitive proposal that it wasn't that women were oppressed, far from it, that it was women who use men and who teach men from the time they are tiny boys that their role in life is to serve women. Right. So she's, and she claims that this is what women do. Women manipulate men. Women learn how to do it. And men are happy to allow themselves to be manipulated because men want to have something to subject themselves to.
Yeah, that was a big part of her video. And, I didn't intend, and I subtitled that video Accidental Book Review for a reason, because I was inspired to do the video in the first place because of your video on which one was it?
I think it was the one about Berkeley and the diversity statements.
Yes, the death of science and all the rest of that. So I got into that, and then I started thinking, and I happened to be reading the book at the time. So it kind of morphed into a kind of book review. And some people took it that I was taking, and also I guess there's three things came together. I had been in a tiny little Twitter tiff about stay-at-home moms. I don't even know why I responded to it, but I thought, stay-at-home moms aren't disrespected.
They're not, horribly oppressed and shamed in our society, far from
And I thought, when I read the little Twitter in the first place, I thought, well, it must be awful great to be a stay-at-home mom. It's kind of like being retired. And so one thing led to another in writing this thing.
Mm-hmm. And you found that it was particularly notable that all sorts of men came forward to attack you personally and quite angrily.
Well, it wasn't that bad. I don't want to exaggerate how bad it was. There was a couple of guys that, took me to task, and it was, it's a tempest in a tiny teapot, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, overall, there was nothing vicious about it. You're not going to go running to the police and say you felt threatened, but a number of men did come forward to defend their women, essentially, and to defend the idea that women who are stay-at-home moms, first of all, work extremely hard, that it's a very difficult job, and two, that they don't get enough
hardest job in the world.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, amazing, and that they don't get any respect for it. That too, that idea, that they slave away, and are dismissed in our culture. And so you were engaging in that, and so that came together with reading Vilar and thinking about the problem that men have saying no and
as
really it's
yeah,
failure to say
yeah.
no to women.
And most importantly, I've been making this connection more and more for a number of years, that the fear or reluctance to say no to women extends to feminism and
Yes.
in our culture as a whole, and that to me is one of the reasons why feminism was able to become so successful so fast, is that our culture, within our culture, men just cannot say no. So feminists were, at
Yeah.
least in the beginning, largely women. They ask, they receive,
They
and
demand
they
and they
demand.
receive.
Yeah, they demand, they receive,
And a man who
and
says no is right away shamed as a woman hater, and that shaming tends to work. Men
and this.
either go ahead.
Oh yeah, and I was going to say that this occurred to me, that why are we not saying no to this requirement for diversity statements in sciences? You know, we have to start saying no to just about everything that feminists demand, because feminism is a hate movement. They are outright trying to take absolute control of our culture, and we have to say no to them. And the reason we have got to this point is because we didn't say
Haven't
no
said
to
no.
them in the past
Yeah.
for a lot of years. And the reason we didn't say no to feminists in the past is that men are reluctant to say no to women in
Women in
general.
general.
In general.
Exactly. Yeah.
That
And
was
I
the
think
main
that's,
point of the
yeah.
video.
Yeah, and I think that does come through, and it's a really good point. It's one of those points that's very obvious when one says it, but that one doesn't necessarily think about when one is kind of confronting, all the fronts on which feminism has made inroads into our culture. And so, yeah, so some people, I guess, watching the first part of your video, which was about stay-at-home moms, but that was really only the launching off point for the rest of the discussion,
Yeah.
felt that you had something against stay-at-home moms, and
And I'd like to clarify that. I don't at all. In fact, I did make this point. I don't know if I pointed it out. I think I put the Twitter comment in the video, but I didn't actually talk about it. But I 100% agree that couples can make their own decisions about their lives in any way they want, whether it's stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home dad, go and live at a mountaintop and don't have anything to do with your culture. I don't. I'm really into that we should be allowed to make our own decisions and be responsible for our own decisions.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And specifically about stay-at-home moms, I mean, some people said, well, look, if you've got young children, isn't it better to have a parent at home to spend
Sure.
time with those children? That's what the children want. Children thrive when they're looked after by their mom and dad rather than by, some government paid person. And so, yeah, I mean, what do you think about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sure. Stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad. But I'll tell you this, I've known a couple of stay-at-home dads, and they are treated like outcasts. Those are the ones that aren't appreciated. A stay-at-home dad could be staying at home, taking care of all the kids, building a house on the side in his spare times, and building an international corporation. And because he's recognized as primarily a stay-at-home dad, he will be looked down upon. A stay-at-home mom can do nothing but stay-at-home mom stuff, and she will be praised. Because it's not accepted. I knew one stay-at-home dad quite well years ago, and he was a stay-at-home dad because his wife was quite successful, and I worked with her. She was in the next office to me, and she was a brilliant woman, and she was a programmer. She had a math degree, and her career was eclipsed anything he could do by a long margin. And so the logical choice for them, they had 5 kids, by the way, and he was a stay-at-home dad for a long time, and he talked about how he was excluded from stay-at-home, from like other parental events, and he'd be like looked down upon and excluded from conversations, not invited to things because he was a man.
I have to say
He
that
did not have a positive experience.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, I've never done any studies of this subject, but certainly it seems to me, just from my impression, I've never met anybody who had contempt for a stay-at-home mom. Whereas I'm quite willing to believe that some people would have contempt for a stay-at-home dad. So I think the gender stereotyping there, it does work, but in the exact opposite direction that feminists would claim. So yeah, that's very interesting.
But that again was not the point of the video.
No, that wasn't the point of the video. Now you did talk about willing sort of men's, you were very interested in what Wheeler has to say about men's deep desire. She sees it as, I think, pretty well entirely socially conditioned, that it's that boys are taught this by their mothers. She talks about how mothers praise boys and teach them to long for praise from the female figures in their family, and that they grow up to look for that praise from the woman that they love, and that they learn to want to devote themselves to something, to sacrifice themselves to something. And a woman makes a perfect god in that sense. Women are quite willing to make up rules that men have to follow, and only in exchange for the following of those rules will the man get the praise that he has learned to desire.
Praise and love,
yes,
and attention that children absolutely need. They need an abundance of this. Children need to be picked up and hugged for no reason. And, they need to be saturated in love and attention to grow well. And I don't mean the helicopter parent style where, I mean with suitable discipline for setting appropriate boundaries.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that's always struck me about feminism, where it obviously gets something wrong, is that feminists tell us that we live in a society that is patriarchal, that is woman hating, that degrades and objectifies women. If that were true, why is it that women are the ones who have by far the greatest influence on male children? Clearly, the mothers have a huge influence. Yeah. Teachers are primarily female, especially in the lower
that's
grades.
Relatively new. That's relatively new, right, Janice? Like, if we go back, when I was in grade school, I did have some male teachers. And that's we're going back a ways now.
But now.
I don't know if there are any left
Very
now.
few, very, very few. And no man would. It's far too dangerous for a man to be a teacher at really any school level, public school level, but certainly in the lower grades, because a false accusation by a troubled, 12-year-old girl can very quickly end that man's career. So yeah, when I went to school, I started
Or his life. And I know some examples of that.
I mean, it is terrifying indeed. And it's sad, because at a time when there are more and more single parent families, mostly headed up by women, boys need male role models, male mentors, and they need them in the school to keep them interested, to give them the father figures that they don't have. And yet this is the time when there are fewer and fewer men in those roles. So, the answer to the feminist statement about how boys are conditioned to view women, and supposedly in these derogatory ways is, well, who's doing the conditioning? It's all women that are responsible for molding those young boys. And so Wheeler's point that actually boys learn to desire to please women and to subjugate themselves to women makes much more sense.
Yeah. And of course, it's a book, so there's a lot in it. It's very, very difficult to convey the sense of a book in a conversation like this. It's a book worth reading. If you have any, and I guess part of this is this conversation is related to this. Some commenters objecting to the metaphor of slavery.
Yes.
And Wheeler uses that metaphor quite strongly. And I would say if a metaphor is a metaphor, it's obviously it's not literal slavery in the dictionary definition of the word. But if you read Wheeler's book, you will understand why the metaphor fits quite well. And even more than Wheeler's book, if you read Warren Farrell's The Myth of Male Power, you will see the male role in society entirely different. It's a brilliant book. For anyone who's interested in this stuff. If you've watched our Fiamengo Files, we're on 114 now, Janice.
Yeah, not to mention the No Joke Janices.
The No Joke Janices were like like 50 or something like that, 40, 50 of them. And then regarding men, there's 50 of those. And then all of the other sites, from the Honey Badgers to Paul Elam and the Ear for Men and the Voice for Men. If you've been watching this stuff and you haven't read The Myth of Male Power, I'll tell
definitely.
you haven't seen the whole story yet.
Yeah, that's
You
really
have to
a must
read The
read.
Myth of Male Power by Warren Farrell.
Yeah, because it does seem like there was one person I noticed in the comment section arguing about specifically about the metaphor of slavery, and there was a very interesting and intelligently articulated back and forth between two viewers, one defending the term and the other objecting to it. And part of his point, I think what he began with was that slavery is precisely the kind of metaphor that feminists like, that to exaggerate, to distort, to use hyperbole to describe women's condition. So it's the last thing that men's rights advocates should be using to describe men's condition. But I can think of some very specific cases, specific situations in which the way in which men are controlled by the state really is properly described as a form of slavery. You want to say something about that, about your understanding of that term and why it's appropriate for men? Not an exact, I mean, it is a metaphor, as you said, but not an inapt metaphor, is your point.
Yeah, and that's the point of metaphors, and that's also the problem with metaphors, is that you can stretch them and stretch them and stretch them until they're so thin that they're like a balloon, they blow up, and that's what feminists do.
Absolutely.
But if you sign up for the military, for example, you sign up, a guy goes to some recruitment center, and it almost looks like a vacation. Come see the world on the military's dime. But you get in there, and some guys might not realize, like, you can't even choose when you can brush your teeth, and you can't back out of that. So and marriage is a bit of a similar thing too. So I mean,
well, and if you think,
and in history. In history, they used to attract men onto fishing boats and naval expeditions in this very same manner. And of course, once the boats have left the dock, they change all the rules. And now what you signed up for has no bearing with reality. And what can you do? You can't jump off the boat. You're stuck there. And that is a kind of slavery.
Well, I mean, absolutely. If you were in a situation where you marry and you have children with your wife, and then your wife leaves you, claiming that you abused her and the children, you are then in a situation where you are forced to pay what the government orders you to pay to this woman until the children are completely grown. You have no choice in the matter. You may not even be able to see those children, yet if you don't pay, you are going to go to prison. Now, if that isn't a form of slavery, I can't think what is. It's
absolutely, it is.
Working for someone else and getting no reward for it, and being imprisoned if you refuse to do it. Wow, that's pretty scary stuff.
The devil's advocate would say that, well, you know that going in, but think about that for a second. Yeah. Think about that for a second. What you're telling men to do, given the knowing the situation, even the man who knows the situation, he has to decide to forego the strongest biological imperative to reproduce. He has to actually decide to give that up because the risk is too great. That's what we're telling men. If you want to biologically follow your biological natural imperative, you have to subject yourself to the possibility of a lifetime of slavery. What kind of choice is that, really?
It's quite a difficult choice.
It's unreasonable, it's outrageous, and it needs to be destroyed.
Yeah, Warren Farrell talks about an example of a young man who, or any man, doesn't have to be a young man, becomes sexually involved with a woman. She tells him she is on birth control. Turns out she has a child by him. She can choose to tell him or not tell him that he has a child. She's under no legal obligation to inform him. 10 or 20 years later, depending on the state that he lives in, he can be hit with child support for which he is going to have to take a much, more stressful, higher paying job in order to be able to make the payments or face prison again. I don't know what percentage of those in prison in the United States now is because they are so-called deadbeat dads who have missed their child support, but I can imagine it's significant. I mean, and you have no choice. Again, that is, it's unimaginable if that were the condition that women were facing now. We would see it as completely unjust. So I think the metaphor of slavery is not not an unreasonable one.
No, not at all. This fellow pointed out that men used to pass out. This is true. There's quite a lot of examples of this, especially in the eastern seaboard of the U.S. With fishing vessels. And fishing vessels used to go out for quite a long haul out of the Chesapeake Bay, and they get drunk guys out of the bars. They'd haul them onto their ships, and then when these guys woke up, they were out at sea. And they'd be out for a month at a time. They're some of them would jump off when they come in to unload ships, fish or whatever cargoes. But they had all kinds of tricks about capturing and enslaving men. And to my knowledge, no ship captain was ever prosecuted for any of these things. It was just an accepted thing.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty sobering stuff when you think it through. And as you say, the fact that many men are actually choosing to forego the desire to have children because the risks are so great shows that they're finding it just an unacceptable price to pay.
Yeah, and that's the MGTOW route, of course, today. The modern version of that, but some men have been foregoing that for quite a long time. But you really have to read the Warren Farrell book. That one to me I'm not quite finished it yet, but it's an eye opener on every page, and it's one book, the first book probably in my life where I feel almost compelled to highlight it on every page.
Exactly. I don't know, I'm asking this now out of complete ignorance, but I wonder if he had read Villard.
I wondered that too,
Somebody wrote to me just recently, he is himself a writer and has written a whole series about whether there's actually a biological basis to gynocentrism. And he's saying that there is, but that within the men's rights movement, there's sometimes a kind of fatalism that we adopt. I'm not going to say his name because I'm not sure if he wants me to talk about this, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind. But anyway, I just started reading. He has a whole series of essays talking about what he sees as a kind of strand of fatalism in the men's rights movement, that we see gynocentrism as sort of inevitable, that it's based in biology, therefore it's unchangeable. And he's saying, no, there is a biological substratum, but that there's an element of social conditioning as well. Anyway, and he was saying that it would be fascinating to have a conversation between Villard and Warren Farrell, and to see the two of them, and because in some ways they're coming at similar kinds of issues, especially around that idea of male enslavement and gynocentrism, although she never uses that term. And I do wonder if he was influenced by Villard. It's a fascinating question.
I wonder too, and it would be a fascinating interview.
Yeah,
because Warren, she's still alive then, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Because she is and she's not terribly concerned about statistics at all. She just
not in that book anyway.
No. Well, I don't know her work, her body of work at all.
I have to admit.
But that particular book is very much, but you can see the truth in it.
Yeah.
Like it's very much just her free thought. But Warren Farrell is literally the opposite. Warren Farrell has stats coming out your ears and references all over the place. There's if you read something in Warren Farrell's book, there's data to back it out.
They come at things from the complete opposite directions, very different ways. Farrell is so methodical, so meticulous in documenting everything. She's just talking about her observations. But
Yeah.
the anecdotes that she uses are so true. She opens with an anecdote about a woman breaks down in her car. What does she do? She waits for a man to pull over and help her. You know that the guy's going to come along and help her. He's going to
Even
feel,
if he's late for his work.
even if he's late for work,
and suffers for it.
Yeah, and suffers for it, even if he has to speed to get to work, even if he's therefore, risks discipline at work or getting into a car accident or whatever, and he's going to feel, she describes, the feeling of satisfaction that he gets from helping that woman, and the woman's acceptance of his work as just something that is her due. And it's really hard to imagine situations in which the woman would behave in the same way. I mean, that is how our society has developed, that women use men to do tasks and expect that men will do things for them, and men do them, and yet at the same time somehow feel guilty as if they're the oppressors rather than the other way around. And it's a fascinating anecdote that really well illustrates her point.
And it does. Interesting thing. Warren is a man, and he's very detailed, very specific, very accurate, and it's got everything backed up. Her story is compelling because you feel it, you've seen it, you have seen that in your life. You sense the reality of that very deeply. Like, you can't deny, she doesn't need to back it up. The way she explains it, she doesn't need stats, I should say.
Yeah.
The way she explains it is exactly how you would, in your mind, you can
everybody
see it.
knows what she's talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, two excellent books. Now, I think we're probably running out of time already, but should we go on to anything about any of the other videos that we released this week briefly?
Sure. We had
leave that for another time. I also released two of mine. The one on the Harvey Weinstein trial.
Brilliant, actually. I thought that was it's not only brilliant, but it's one of the most important topics facing our culture today. Yeah. And like, we're always surprised at which videos take off and which don't. And Weinstein is in the middle. Weinstein's video is in the middle there somewhere. It's fairly successful, 13 to 15,000 views.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed, I must admit. Not because I want to, think my videos are so great that everybody should watch them, but it does seem to me that it is such a key, central issue facing us today. And
at its core is justice, and what justice means, and how we execute justice. And
I haven't really seen. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe there are conversations going on all over the internet world that I'm just not aware of. But I haven't seen a lot of people.
People are afraid to defend him. People are afraid to speak out for all the reasons that you've elucidated in 114 episodes on the Fiamengo file.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess
all of those reasons, because if you try to defend a man who's accused by women, that you are going to be needing to defend yourself pretty quickly. Nobody's defending Weinstein.
Not in mainstream discourse at all.
And I don't mean to say, when I say defending Weinstein, I mean defending his right to due process, presumption of innocence, to his right to all of what means as justice.
Yeah. I mean,
if we don't defend, there's a famous saying about this. I can't recall it to mind at the moment, but if the worst person is not due justice, then who is due justice? Some viewer out there probably knows the quote I'm trying to grasp. I can't get it, but if it's not justice for all, it's justice for none.
For none, exactly. And if Weinstein, who of course is extremely wealthy and has been able to afford an excellent legal defense team, but if even he can be run over in the way that he is being run over, in my opinion, the things that are going on in his trial are, in my opinion, again, and I'm not a legal expert by any means, so I invite people to correct me, but they seem to me outrageous what's being done. I mean, now recently the prosecution has just introduced all these naked photos of him. I have no idea what those are supposed to achieve in the trial at all. I mean, there's no doubt that he had sex with these women. That's not in question. So what is the point of introducing these photos if not to simply humiliate and demean and degrade him in some way? And, and the idea of all these other witnesses coming forward to testify about their abuse, even though he's not on trial for what they are alleging he did to them.
And you made a great point about why are we not allowed to look into the accuser's background, but we are allowed to look into Weinstein's, the accused background.
It's not even as if these are prior bad acts, like prior crimes. These are just allegations.
Just allegations.
I just find it astounding.
Hearsay, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, if somebody can make a legal argument against me and explain why that is appropriate, I'd really like to hear it. One person sort of tried to in the comment section, and I didn't really understand what he was saying, and then a few people responded to him, and he didn't write back again. But I would really like to hear from somebody with legal expertise about why that's appropriate in a criminal trial where somebody is facing the rest of his life in prison, where he could actually be convicted, not on the basis of the testimony of those who are accusing him, but on the basis of testimony of those whom the prosecution isn't even attempting to prosecute him for. Here's a question. Why
Janice,
are they defending that
we've
pervert? Yeah, we've
okay,
heard that.
and now this is the point. This is the exact point here, and thank you, 20 Faces, for bringing this up. We're not defending, quote, that pervert. And I even don't even accept that pervert thing. This to what appears to be going on here, and it could be wrong. If there's some specific case of he actually raped somebody, then okay, fine. Charge him. Convict him, all the rest of that. But listen, what it appears to be, what it appears to be here is 30 years later, 20 years later, 10 years later, whatever it is the women didn't get what they thought they were going to get, and now they're changing the game and calling it rape. Okay, if that's the case, and here's the other thing, I don't even care what the women and him, they could have had whatever they want with 35 women and 25 guys doing whatever they want in there. I don't care. It's not the point. Did he rape them or did he not rape them? Exactly. And I saw this same argument used against Johnny Depp in one of these videos too, that, why should we be concerned about an immoral person like Johnny Depp? Yeah. Well, who's to say Johnny Depp is immoral? There's a case or there's not a case. There's a crime or there's not a crime. And if we're not treating every accused person with the same rights and responsibilities, then we don't have justice of any kind anywhere for anyone. And that includes those people who are saying that Weinstein is a pervert. Okay?
Absolutely.
Saying Weinstein is a pervert is irrelevant.
It's not a legal argument. It has nothing to do
it's irrelevant.
Whether he's guilty in these cases or not. I mean, it was the same with
And even if he is, in somebody's book, a pervert, even if he is, he still deserves the full protection of the law, which includes the presumption of innocence, as every one of us deserves. And if he doesn't get it, that same argument for him not getting it will be the same argument for you and me and everybody viewing here and everybody on YouTube also not getting the presumption of innocence and the due process according to the law.
It's not about Weinstein and whether one likes him personally or has a hunch about whether he's morally or legally guilty. It's about due process and the presumption of innocence. If we aren't willing to defend that, then we might as well forget about having a civilized society at all.
And I'll include freedom of speech in that. Presumption of innocence and freedom of speech. I know we're not talking about freedom of speech, but there's a strong argument for the very, they're the two strongest, they're the two things that give us any freedom whatsoever in our culture.
And both are easy to defend when we like the person or like the speech that we want to see protected. and difficult to defend when the speech is hideous or the person may seem to be hideous. But it's precisely in those difficult cases that we have to defend those two principles, those cornerstones of a free society. And it shocks me really that I see so little discussion, principled discussion about the Harvey Weinstein trial so far.
And I want to also just point out to viewers here, if you haven't seen it, you should watch Christopher Hitchens' defense of freedom of speech, and especially in face of hate speech. Do you know the debate that I'm talking about, Janice? I'm sure you've seen it.
I've seen lots of Hitchens, but I don't know if I know that particular one that you're talking about.
He defines it, and a big part of his argument, and he's probably made this point many, many times, is that, like, if you say that hate speech is not allowed, then who gets to say what is hate speech?
Who gets to decide?
Who gets to decide?
One doesn't want, you know what? It's always somebody that one doesn't trust.
And and that becomes the dictator. And but Hitchens is very eloquent on that, and and it's the final word on the importance of freedom of speech. I have not heard any argument that can be used against Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens' argument. Not a logical one. There's all kinds of emotional feminist nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's the same about Weinstein. I mean, I would certainly invite, you know, like Jesse Parker's comment here, better 10 guilty men go free than one innocent suffer. That's exactly it. It's a recognition that in a civilized society, we recognize the horror of the power of the state used against innocent people. And we are going to make protections for those people. And it does mean that, yes, it's hard to convict. You have to set the bar high so that innocent people are not convicted. And especially so that they're not convicted as a result of a general feeling that they must be guilty. And
a corollary to this is that, I forgot what I was going to say, but I'm going to highlight this other problem here. Someone says here the problem is that who decides who is guilty? Well, we have that. We have a trial by peers, a trial with a jury of your peers. That's who decides who is guilty. Yeah, and that's where it ends. That is where it ends. A trial by jury with the rules of presumption of innocence and a beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal proceeding.
And it's
that's
not
where
perfect.
it ends.
Obviously, it's not perfect because many innocent people are convicted nonetheless, and many guilty go free as well. But it's the best that's been developed over the centuries. And the thought that we're going to throw it out and institute some brand new feminist or SJW version is just terrifying.
It's horrible. You know, and this is when we go back to the presumption, the guilty thing. We better that 10 men go guilty. Guilty men go free than one innocent. We are now in the age of victim culture, and we've reversed that. We flipped it on its coin. It's better that one victim gets one. I'm not even be able to speak now. I'm so pissed off with it.
I would say
I get so wound up on this one.
The feminist version is something like better 10 innocent men have their lives ruined or indeed go to prison than one accuser, one woman accuser hesitate to come forward.
There you go. That's where we're at today.
Or face the trauma of not being believed. That's what we've come to now. And they will say that right out. And the idea is always that somehow we've had centuries of women not being believed. So now it's the time for women to be believed. I don't buy that we had centuries of women not being believed. But even if that were true, up until yesterday, it's still no argument for why now innocent men should be punished. That's a horrible theory of collective vengeance. I mean, we're probably speaking mostly to the converted already and saying
maybe I'm not so sure. There are people with legitimate questions, and you know, I have to say, you know, I'm at a different place now than I was 30, 40 years ago when I was young, and I thought, you know, we could all sing Kumbaya around a fire and the world was going to be great, you know. So there's some realities, though. But by the way, I want to thank you for articulating exactly what I was trying to get out, but I couldn't do it from my fog of
Okay.
Wound up.
And this is the kind of thing, like I was a bit disappointed in I mean, I always want every video, of course, to be viewed by 100,000 people or 1 million, whatever. But I was disappointed in the Weinstein case that there wasn't a lot of robust discussion, about the principles of his trial and that sort of thing. And so I want to encourage anybody who thinks that I've missed something or wasn't logical in that argument, to challenge me, because I do think this is maybe, it's one of the central issues of our time, not Weinstein in particular, but the future of sexual assault trials and the future of, discussions about sexual assault, which I think, has gone completely awry.
Yeah, for sure. I popped up this Salem witch trial reference, partly because I recently read in Warren Farrell's book, actually, that a lot of people talk about the witch trials as the male sort of oppression of women, burning women and stuff like that. Which is quite
not
wrong.
Quite true. Yeah.
No, not even close to true.
No, it was
it's the
mainly
opposite.
Female accusers.
Well, Warren Farrell makes a extremely good point, and again, it's in the myth of male power. He says that the witch burnings began because two young girls had some epileptic fits and accused or believed that it was some health administration from some woman. And so it was a rush to protect the young girls that led to the burning of not just women, but males, witches as well. Yeah. So it was always, and you have to read Warren Farrell's book to get the full sense of this, but all of these things in history that feminists are trying to twist as to be evidence of male oppression of women are actually males' rush to protect women.
Mm-hmm. And these outbursts of hysterical allegation are often primarily fueled by women. And certainly Me Too, I think, is a really good example of that. And it spreads, as if through contagion. And the results are that all of the civilized mechanisms that we've put into place over the centuries fall away, and people are accused and judged instantaneously.
Janice, I've popped this one comment up, and then maybe this will be the last one because we are into 50 minutes almost here now. I know you have something to say about this. Just read the comment. I'm pretty sure you have something to say about this.
The guy is very likely guilty. Yeah. I just don't agree. You can have 100 people accuse somebody. There are all sorts of reasons why accusers make accusations. It doesn't mean that the person actually is guilty at all. In this case, there are all sorts of reasons why there are benefits to be accrued to accusers. There's money, there's public fame, there's the idea of one's great courage in coming forward, there's the ability to tell one's story to a very sympathetic audience, there's the possibility of a civil lawsuit in the future. There are all sorts of reasons why one might come forward. There's also just personal anger. There's the reassessment of a sexual relationship that maybe wasn't entirely pleasant, but was not actually rape. There's a desire for vengeance that all of us harbor in our hearts and that can be released under various circumstances. And even if he is guilty, the cornerstone of the civilized society is that guilt has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. If we don't have that, we don't have anything.
Exactly. Well said.
Okay,
maybe
we can end it there.
we probably
it's a good argument, and I'm not saying I have all the answers. It's a really good argument to be had, and I find the thing that is most disconcerting about our present moment is that we don't have these arguments in mainstream media anymore.
Well, I could say also this about one more comment about the 6 women testifying against him. The phenomenon of hysteria is a bit of a parallel here. If 100 people feel sick and they all attribute it to some gas leak, and there's and this is just one example of a mass hysteria, does it mean that there must have been a gas leak or that there must have been some organic cause for those 100 people to all be sick at the same time? No, it doesn't.
You would think
because
so, but it doesn't actually
it
turn
doesn't.
out to be the case.
No, there's so many examples of hysteria in history, and hysteria itself is infective. Now, it's quite possible that women will reinterpret their past experience with Weinstein after hearing that other women are calling their experience rape. And then it snowballs. And then all of a sudden, all these women are saying, oh, you know something? I think I was raped too. And, you know, when you think about, if psychologists would know about this, the memory is constantly refreshed. It's very malleable. And women, in fact, have more malleable memories than men, is what I've read. Now, I can't pull a study out about this,
I don't know anything about that.
They're more impressionable and more subject to influence to change their memories than men are. But people have actually been convinced by suggestion that a cat actually walked across their frickin' desk, a black cat, describe it and everything, while they're being videoed, okay? And they've had their memory changed to say that by suggestion by psychologists that there was actually a black cat there. And when shown the video, they can't believe that there was no black cat there.
I mean,
that's how malleable memory is.
There are TED Talks about this that one can find, and I can't remember the name of the woman who is right now the renowned expert on the malleability of memory and the difficulty of relying on memory in criminal cases and all sorts of things. I just can't think of her name right now, but yeah, I mean, that's a proven fact. And
well, when I related to this idea that 6 women are testifying, six is nothing for a guy like Weinstein. For instance.
He's been accused by 100, but
by 100. But what I mean to say is, when I say nothing, is he's a high-profile guy who's very rich and he's been with a lot of women. But like to suggest that these women couldn't, or maybe wouldn't reinterpret their experiences as rape.
I think it's very likely.
It's very, very possible. So,
and the other thing is that, this is not about judging, trying to get inside his heart or his consciousness to know. I mean, we cannot know. I cannot know what happened in those hotel rooms. The thing is, if we don't have a system whereby guilt must be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And in this case, the stories simply are not very credible. These are women who had relationships with him. They went on to maintain affectionate relationships with this man. They sent him loving emails. They sought him out. They contacted him because they wanted to get together with him at future points. We're told, well, that's the behavior of some victims of rape. That's how they tried to normalize what happened to them and justify it. But I'm sorry, it does not make their testimony credible. It makes it seem highly unlikely that rape was what actually happened.
And it's no way to run a justice system in any way, shape, or form. It is a disaster for every member of society.
Well, for every male member in particular, because this is something that would only be accepted in cases of female accusations against men. And so we're talking about the future of sexual assault trials for every man. And if Weinstein can be abused in this way, which I think he is being abused in the courtroom, then what man can't be? Because most men are not going to be able to afford a hotshot legal defense. So it is a terrifying precedent for all men. Any question about changing the standards in order to get more women into firefighting?
That's a good question, but generally it's lowering the standards because of the lower physical capacities of women.
But that's already happened, hasn't it?
Happened,
I don't think that there's any question about that. That's what's been done in pretty much every country in the Western world in order to get more women into firefighting.
And I just wanted Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I still think that what it ends up meaning is that women can be admitted as firefighters, although I don't think they actually do the same work as the men, because they simply can't. They don't have the physical strength.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard from male firefighters.
And we see that that often, and what I've seen in at least one example in a New York City fire, is that the female ends up being the captain of the
Right.
firefighter because she doesn't have the physical
can't do-
capacity
yeah.
to do the actual work. So
Yeah.
that has a knock-on effect of depriving the very worthy males of a capacity for advancement in their career, because it has to be given to a woman who actually can't do the job in the field. You know, but having said that, I
All in
wanted
the name of equality.
to highlight.
I've lost you, Steve. I've lost you, Steve. I can't hear anything. Can't hear you at all. Uh-oh. Can't hear you at all. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now, but not good.
Not good.
Sound is quite bad. It started breaking up there near the end, and then you went off altogether.
Okay, let me just something. Can you hear me now?
That's better. That's better.
Okay, sorry about that. I had wanted to highlight the generous donations coming in. We've got quite a few generous donations, and our conversation was so fast and furious, and I was getting all heated that I didn't have an opportunity to highlight our generous donors. So I want to thank everyone who donated tonight. We really do appreciate it. We really do.
Very much.
Because YouTube really doesn't want to give us any advertising dollars.
Sure. No, I think we're going to have to give up on advertising on YouTube. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was good. Thanks, Steve.
Excellent discussion. Thanks again for joining us, Janice, or being with us. And thanks for joining us, everyone in the audience.
Else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to get a little more refined professionalism here on my end, but what can you say? That's what you get for mostly free.
What a lifetime. Yeah. Okay. Well,
thank you, everyone, and thanks again for the generous donors.
Night. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yes, great weekend.
See ya.